All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Murray City Planning Commission on July 18th, 2019. I guess first and foremost, we need to entertain a motion. Our chair and our vice chair are both absent this evening, and so I need a motion to chair.
Mr. Chairman, well, it will be Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion that Travis Ney serve as Chairman Pro Tem for this meeting this evening.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Call for a vote.
Mr. Woodbury, Mr. Markham.
Yes.
Mr. Woodbury.
Yes.
Ms. Patterson.
Yes.
Ms. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Dean.
Yes. All right. Now we'll move forward. Housekeeping for the evening. If you have any cell phones, we ask that you silence your cell phone. If you need to take phone calls, we ask that you take those out in the other room. You'll notice that our doors are open in the back, so maybe even down the hall would be preferable. We have a very busy agenda this evening. We will give you an opportunity to speak to specific agenda items during those presentations. If you are here representing a group of individuals, we'll give you 5 minutes. If you are here by yourself, just speaking as an individual, we'll give you 3 minutes. We do ask that you give us new evidence when you present, so we don't want to hear the same thing from every single person. So please try to provide some new evidence for us. We have a little bit of housekeeping we need to take care of, and then we'll move into the formal agenda. Item number 1 this evening is approval of the minutes from the June 20th, 2019 meeting. Has everybody had an opportunity to review those?
Yes.
And any changes, questions? No. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the Thursday, June 20th, 2019 Planning and Zoning meeting.
I have a motion by Mr. Woodbury, second.
Second that motion.
Second by Ms. Mokevich. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Item number 2, does anybody have any conflicts of interest with any of the agenda items this evening?
No.
No.
That's a no for me as well. Item number 3 is approval of the finding of facts. We have Reuben Accessory Dwelling Unit at the property address 689 East Silver Shadow Drive. Has everybody had an opportunity to review that?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll entertain a motion if there's no changes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we approve the findings of fact for a conditional use permit for the Reuben ADU.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Markham. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Patterson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, item number 4. This is going to be a conditional use permit for stock seeking a accessory dwelling unit at the property address 305 East, 6340 South. Is that applicant here this evening? Yes. We'll have you up in just a moment after the presentation. Mr. Smallwood.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is an application for an accessory dwelling unit located at, like you said, 305 East, 6340 South. It's located roughly near Winchester and Bastion Boulevard. If you're familiar where our power station is here, it's located up just a little bit north and east of that. Accessory dwelling units are allowed in any single-family residential neighborhood or zone, subject to a conditional use permit. Only a couple things of note here. This is the site plan provided by the applicant. As was mentioned in kind of our pre-meeting, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, they allowed, subdivisions allowed people to determine where their front and rear lot lines were located. So the side of the house is the front and, or the two sides of the house are the front and rear, and then the front and rear of the house are the sides. So it's kind of flipped all backwards. So what looks like their rear yard is 12 feet is really their interior side yard. So it looks a little weird, but they did get they do have a rear walkout basement located at the back of their property. And then here is a floor plan of the site. It's drawn a little, scaled a little differently, if you'll notice. Here, north is facing up for the main dwelling side, and then for the ADU, north is facing down. So I kind of drew some arrows to where the entrances are there. Couple other things. The home, the dwelling is 1,750 square feet. The proposed accessory dwelling unit is 627 square feet, which is approximately 36% of the total of the home. Our regulations require that it has to be less than 40% and less than 1,000 square feet. This does meet that. Additionally, we only allow up to 2 bedrooms. This is only 1. Here are a few pictures of the site where it shows you the exterior of the home. And then these are the few photos that I have. I actually I went in and did a site visit here, I think on the 3rd of July, and just observed kind of what the area looked like. If you'll notice, one thing I did want to point out here on the floor plan, the bathroom says it's 3 feet 8 inches. That's why I went out for a site visit, because that seemed really small. So here I kind of looked at that, didn't just eyeballed it. It's definitely not 3 foot 8 inches. So it's a little larger. It's still a small bathroom, but a bathroom's a bathroom. So with that, staff is recommending approval for the conditional use permit for the accessory dwelling unit, subject to the 12 conditions listed below. Of note on this is condition number 12, that temporary rentals are not allowed, such as Airbnb, VRBO. Those are not allowed in the city, but we do like to condition that specifically for these. So, any questions for staff?
Have you had comment from any of the neighbors?
Yes, I did have a call from the neighbor, I believe, just to the east, and she was just concerned. She just had general questions. Didn't really have. I don't believe she had an opinion either way. She was glad that there aren't short-term rentals allowed, and that we actually specifically state that in here as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
If we could have the applicants come up, we'll have you just state your name and address for the record, please.
Yep, of course. My name is Ryan Stock,
Melissa Stock.
and the address is 305 East 6340 South in Murray.
Okay, have you had an opportunity to review the 12 conditions, and can you comply with the 12 conditions?
Yes.
Okay, do you have anything that you'd like to add to the presentation?
No.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Pretty straightforward. All right, thank you.
Perfect.
At this point in time, we will open this item up for public comment. If there's anyone here that would like to speak to this issue, come on up. Please. Yep. We'll just have you state your name and address.
I'm Karen Thorne, and I'm the neighbor to the east. 315 East, 6340 South.
Thanks.
I didn't see, I was trying to scan real quickly the 12 conditions. It does state that it is owner occupied rental?
Owner occupied, yes.
Okay, that was my big.
Yep. As long as in order to have an accessory dwelling, you have to live on the property.
Okay, and Murray City doesn't plan to change that anytime soon?
Well, we don't make those rules,
Yeah.
but
But it is the golden.
So.
It's the golden ticket in all of this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Bring it back up here for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit to allow an accessory dwelling unit at the property address 305 East, 6340 South, subject to the 12 conditions in their report.
I have a motion by Mr. Patterson to approve a conditional use permit to allow an accessory dwelling unit at the property address 305 East, 6340 South. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to second that motion.
And I have a second by Ms. Milkevich. Call for a vote, please.
Commissioner Patterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Milkevich,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodbury,
Yes.
Commissioner Markham,
Yes.
and Commissioner
Yes. And that motion carries. Good luck. Item number 5 and 6 will be heard as a single item this evening. This is going to be Roderick Enterprises seeking a general plan amendment from office to professional office and a zoning map amendment from commercial development and general office to professional office at the property address 5920 South Fashion Boulevard. Is that applicant here this evening? Okay, perfect. Mr. Smallwood.
Great, thank you guys. This is a request to amend the general plan, like you'd said, and the zoning map. These will be presented as items together, just for consistency. So this is the subject property here. It's on the corner of 5900 South and Fashion Boulevard. Currently, as it stands right now, even though it shows as one property, it is zoned as two different things. The north half is GO, which is our general office zone, which allows for different types of office uses. And the red right there, the southern part of that property is CD, which is our commercial development zone. The mall's located in the CD. A lot of our retail components are part of the CD there. Their request is to, well, let me get into a couple things real quick. This currently, so in October of 2018, there were approximately 7 parcels that encompassed this area. And at some point between October and January, there was a lot consolidation that hadn't come through the city but was recorded as Salt Lake County. So that needs to be addressed as part of a future, any potential future development. That's why you currently have 2 zones on one piece of property. So currently, our general plan calls for this to be office, which the zones that are classified under that for the general plan is just general office. If you see just to the south there, that dark blue, that is what they are proposing to change this property to. Professional office only encapsulates the professional office zone, which is a new zone. I apologize, I don't know the date that we actually brought that zone forward. I apologize. So this would actually be the first property to be zoned PO. Staff sees this as a natural progression of the PO zone. Some of the regulations are fairly similar across all 3 zones: the CD, the GO, and the PO. The real main difference is in accordance with height. In the general office zone, you are allowed a base of 35 feet, and then for every 4 feet away from a residential zone, you are allowed additional foot of height. However, in the PO zone, if you are outside of 100 feet from a residential zone, then you are allowed to go up to 50 feet. So it's a change in 15 feet, which is approximately about a floor. So 35 to 50 is about 3 to 4 floors probably. And then, so here are a lot of pictures of the property because it's big, but it's pretty vacant, just kind of covered in vegetation at this point. There are some existing uses surrounding the neighborhood, or this parcel. There are some existing residential uses, which would allow for, if this were to be rezoned and a development were to come forward, there would be buffering that would occur, a 10-foot buffer and a 6-foot minimum masonry fence built, buffering those properties from any potential office building. So here we do have the findings that this does seem to be a natural expansion of the professional office zone between Tosh to the north, University of Utah Healthcare to the south, and also the general office around that area as well. So staff is recommending that that you forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the change of the general plan future land use map and the zoning map as well. And that would be 2 motions that you would need to make on that. Any questions for me?
Questions for staff at this point?
All right.
Okay.
Okay,
Guess we're good
thank
for a
you.
minute. If we could have the applicant come up, please. I think that's the longest walk I've ever watched an applicant have to do. If you could just state your name and address, please.
Michael Roderick Enterprises, 1214 East Vine Street, Murray, Utah.
Have you, well, I guess that really what we'll do is we'll say, what else would you like to add to the presentation, and why do you feel that this change is necessary for you to move forward with a project.
We just want to be consistent with the neighborhood and specifically consistent with what IHC is doing and University of Utah. We thought we're kind of in the middle of both. And so our initial plans were to build a corporate headquarters for our company ourselves. But we had quite a bit of medical interest from the community, so we decided to check out the zoning, see what those options were, and it just seemed more sense to be consistent with our neighbors to the north and south. So we thought we would try to get that at first before we move forward on anything else.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
Not right now. I'd like to see if there's any comment from the public first.
Yeah. So we'll open it up to public comment here, and then we may bring you back up if there are questions that we want your help answering. So at this point in time, thank you. At this point in time, we will open this up for public comment. So if anyone would like to speak, again, we offer you 3 minutes if you're speaking as an individual, 5 minutes as you're speaking as a group, and we ask that you state your name and address for the record.
My name is Kim Kimball. My address is 5998 Gillen Lane. I have just 2 questions. The first question is, kitty corner to this property is McMillan Elementary School. On the property that was rezoned together with 2 other properties, there was a gentleman last year that came in that wanted to make a dental office in there and was told that it would increase the traffic substantially, and so his request was rejected. Now, if we're going to increase an extra floor on these buildings, besides bringing the buildings in, or these properties in, is that not going to increase substantially the amount of traffic going in there that's going to affect that McMillan Elementary School? It's just kitty corner and the kids walking back and forth for school. The second thing, let me think here. Yeah, that was the main thing, so I can't think what the other one was right offhand. So.
Thank you.
So I was just curious, the other thing was, as far as the parking lot and where it's located, is it going to be parking lot going to be next to McMillan School?
Unfortunately, that one we don't know because there are no formal plans before us. So
which would increase traffic there as well?
Potentially. Okay. Thank you. Good evening.
My name is Janet Hill, and I live at 5970 Afton Avenue. And I am new to Murray. I've only been here for a little over 2 years. But I went to the Murray City website to pull off information on zoning. And one of the things that it says is that the process or the purpose of zoning is to provide adequate open space for light and air and prevent overcrowding of land. And then I pulled up the future land use map that's currently on there, and it has, in connection with that purpose, this designed as office space. And I have to believe that was thought out well at that time. And it seems that 2 floors is more consistent with all the buildings around there. There is a three-story buildings at the end, more towards the mall, but not on this end. So I think it's more consistent to keep it as office, other than raising it to a 3-story. Also, I have a small problem with the way that this was announced. My driveway is 2/10 of a mile from the property, and I did not receive a notice. And I don't know what that translates into in feet, but I'm sure from my backyard I'm even closer. And also, C in the notice says that the applicant shall be responsible to post notification signage on property where a request for a zone change or conditional use permit is proposed. The sign shall be provided to the applicant by the city and shall be posted in advance of the scheduled meeting. As of 6:10 tonight, there's no notice. So I question how many people actually know that this is happening, and those are my 2 points.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one else, I will close the public comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, in the back.
Thank you. I have two properties.
Can you state your name and address, please?
Shirlene Lundskog, 5951 South, 2nd East, and also the property on Gillen Lane, right behind my home. And my son also has a home there on Gillen Lane. And this property that's being considered will border that property. So we are concerned about, will there be a tax? How will the taxes be raised with the rezoning on this? And also the height of the building, which has also been discussed.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'll close the public comment. Mr. Smallwood, I'll bring you back up. So I'm going to actually ask you a pointed question here. I don't recall any application coming to the Planning Commission for this property. I recall a dental office being brought up much further down on Fashion Boulevard,
This property.
but it was not this property.
No, it was
That is
issue better because I represented that particular issue. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to state that it was a residentially zoned property, and it was further down on Fashion Boulevard, much within a residential area.
And I don't necessarily recall traffic being what stopped
It's
us.
in the notes, it's in the minutes.
I'm
Traffic
going to actually have you not yell out, please. So we gave you an opportunity to speak.
I'll let Jim speak to it.
I'll clarify on that. So the rezoning was denied. That was the Smith Family Dental application. The zoning's R18, and there's a potential for them to subdivide and get 2 or 3 lots in there, and that remains viable today. The council chose not to grant that rezoning because of the potential impact to the neighborhood that was all around it, and with the existing R18 single-family zone that was in place. There used to be a home there and a larger property. And then it's also directly across the street from the mall. So in that case, they were not comfortable with that proposed rezoning. 2 quick points of clarification. The professional office zone was adopted a year ago, in July of 2018. We created this zone because we were tasked to do so when the new general plan was adopted in May of 2017. So this zone, as well as other zones, were adopted by the council in July of 2018. Thank you.
Jim, can I ask you a question real quick, or a point of information? This board or this group committee discussed the Smith Family Dental, and then it went on to City Council. So there's 2 different discussions that could be read in minutes, right?
Yes, multiple discussions did occur, and multiple groups. You know, there was a group that was for the proposal and a group that was strongly against the proposal. It was kind of divided the neighborhood, but at the end of the day, the council denied that petition.
But it was not in regards to this subject property.
No.
It was a totally different property.
Completely different.
Yeah.
Sure. So a couple things that I wrote down, I'll address them, and if you think of anything else, please let me know. The first one was McMillan Elementary. Even though we do not have a proposal in front of us, I would anticipate, because of the PO zone, I believe in the purpose statement, it says it wants those buildings to be built closer to the street. And to obtain any additional height, it would need to be further away from any residential zone. So I would anticipate that the building would be closer to McMillan Elementary as opposed to a parking lot. That's just speculation at this point, just knowing site design, things like that. So that's kind of what I would address there. And I would anticipate a parking lot would probably be further back in that buffered area between the residential, with that 10 feet residential buffer and the fencing and things. And then looking specifically, the current uses allowed there would be office space and commercial development. Looking at the staff report, a lot of the things here would allow for technically the same amount of space for the property. For example, there is no like lot coverage minimum, so they could they could build out the lot as intensely as they want, subject to parking, obviously.
Current zone?
I'm sorry?
Is this, are you speaking to the current zone or the?
Yeah, the GO and CD, the current zones. So in the GO, it would be a 30-foot max height. CD would be 35, within 100 foot of residential zoning, like I stated before. However, they could go, so in the CD and GO, like I had mentioned, every 4 feet from setback, they could go up an additional foot. And that's in perpetuity. They could go as high as they want as long as they're further away. In the PO zone, they are maxed at 50 feet when they are over 100 feet away. So this actually puts a 50-foot limit.
We actually have more control over.
Yeah, we do have more control over that there.
With the proposed new zone.
Correct, within the PO zone there. And then also just looking, I do believe through my analysis, I was looking at the areas, and there are a couple 3- and 4-story buildings in the Tosh area as well, as well as the University of Utah's new campus to the south. Staff believes this would be pretty consistent.
And the university building, isn't that a 5-story building? Yeah.
I think it's only 4.
Is it?
Yeah. But it could be wrong. And then specifically getting to noticing, we do post our notices on the Utah State Public Noticing website. Susan is very diligent about doing that, so it is located there. And we do send those out, and I need correction if I'm wrong, but I believe it's a 300-foot radius from the property. So some people, even though they may seem close, may be outside of that noticing, and that is consistent with state and meets with state law.
Well, most importantly, she made it here this evening, so.
Exactly.
She was here.
Yes.
What about the notice on the property? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I did go out on a property visit, and I didn't specifically look for that, but I can't speak to it, unfortunately. I didn't verify that it was posted. It was supposed to be posted 10 days prior. I'm not sure. I didn't go out and actually do a manual inspection on that.
It is the applicant's responsibility.
It is the applicant's responsibility to post that.
And we've had on occasion where those notices have been removed by people. So it was given to him. Susan Nixon from our staff provided that to the applicant to post the property. The hearing notices, like Mr. Smallwood has indicated, go out. They're effective. We have people here tonight. Not only do we post on the state site, but it's also posted in public places here at City Hall and on the city's website. So we meet all state code statute on noticing requirements.
Perfect.
And then the last thing that I wanted to address was tax. With a zone change, it wouldn't affect any property owners taxing. It would affect, sorry, let me rephrase that. It would affect the single property owner's tax, but it wouldn't affect a neighboring property owner's property taxes. So, yeah, that's really.
We're not changing anything with the surrounding area.
No, we are not.
Just this specific.
That's correct.
Lot.
This specific subject property is the only one we're discussing tonight.
Would it also be fair to say we don't have any influence or information over taxing? All we know is the zoning, and technically both zones are so similar. The tax resolving from those two zones should be very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. It would definitely be different than a residential home property tax.
Mr. Small, can I just ask you?
Sure.
So when the general plan was adopted and we were given the tasking to create the professional office zone, it wasn't included in the general plan because it came later.
Yes.
Right. So the future land use of this is general office. Do you think that if that zone would have been created at the time of the adoption of the general plan, that this would be a target area that we would have been looking at professional office to, because of how we didn't have that zone, so we couldn't apply it?
Well, there's a couple of things that I'll have to kind of unpack there. We created that professional office zone because we put in the general plan. So if you look, I put the future land use map up back here. We had stated that we would create a new professional office zone based off of the indication of this professional office land use designation here. So yes and no. These were trial kind of areas of where
and we were looking at places
where we
to
would
put
think the professional office would be adequate
Mhm.
and appropriate. So moving forward, as things have kind of grown, again with the University of Utah building their facility just to the south, that kind of plays into that as well.
And the northernmost properties here originally had homes at the time of the passing of the general plan.
That's
It was
correct.
only because of a fire that those homes were removed.
That's correct.
Right, but we were designating that future land use would be office.
Correct.
Versus, you know, if we would have had professional office, it is bordered on the north and south by that zone. It might have, you know, if we had looked at that and had that option, that might have been a future land use.
It could have come up as
zone
part of the
for this
analysis.
specific
It's
area.
definitely an
We
office
just-
corridor.
Right, we just didn't, you know, necessarily have that zone to look to the future to apply.
Commissioner Patterson, that's a great question. It's hard to drill down to the details of
Right.
every specific property because our general plan process took 2.5 years.
Right, yeah.
So we dotted our I's and crossed our T's and tried. But it makes sense here because it abuts or touches an existing professional office
Right,
on the general
exactly,
plan
that's
land
my
use map. It's just kind of squaring that area up. If it was just completely out on its own, that would be a different set of circumstances. But you know, this zone was created for IMC and all the different medical type campuses at some point in time. So I think it's a good use for this property.
Right.
Did
I think you've covered the bulk. I'm going to bring the applicant back up.
Okay, perfect.
I just have a single question for you. Where did you post the notice?
Originally on 3rd East, it was torn down a couple times, and we put it on the south part where Fashion Square Boulevard is. That's on our property.
Yeah, I
It
do
should still be there.
I do recall seeing at one point in time on the south end of the property, but it's been. That's good. Any other questions for the applicant?
Can I make just one comment also?
Sure, please.
Our company has been involved in Murray since the 1950s.
Your office is right down the street from my house.
Thank you, thank you.
It's your front yard looks awful right now.
Yeah.
So does mine. Vine Street's being ripped up. So
the city's wisdom in getting this road fixed. So I'll give you guys credit for that one. But we love Murray dearly, and that's what attracted us to this site. And we hope to keep our corporate headquarters here. My grandfather was in the service station business and parlayed a couple service stations into. We were one of the original developers of Fashion Place Mall. We have Fashion Plaza Shopping Center to the south of that, where Macaroni Grill is, and the rest of that shopping center. We did the adjacent office park where University of Utah campus is now. So I just say that for some of the new people in the area that may not know anything about us, that we do long-term quality projects. We don't build them to sell. We want to stay here as part of the community for, I'm 3rd generation, I'm not going anywhere. So that's just a little history.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, back up here for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment to the general plan future land use map designation of the property located at 5920 South Fashion Boulevard from office to professional office.
Okay, point of order really fast. Do I have to have a second public comment period for the second motion? No? Okay. 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 All right, I have a motion by Mr. Markham to forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendments to the general plan future land use map designation on the property located at 5920 South Fashion Boulevard from office to professional office. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, I have a second by Mr. Woodbury. Call for a vote, please.
Commissioner Markham.
Yes.
Commissioner Woodbury.
Yes.
Commissioner Patterson?
Yes.
Commissioner Markovich?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes, that motion carries. I will now entertain a motion to amend the city zoning map.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment to the zoning map, designations of the property located at 5920 South Fashion Boulevard from CD Commercial Development NGO General Office to PO Professional Office.
All right, I have a motion by Mrs. Patterson for the recommendation.
second.
And a second by Mr. Markham to forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designations of the property located at 5920 South Fashion Boulevard from CD Commercial Development and GO General Office to PO Professional Office. Call for a vote, please.
Commissioner Patterson?
Yes.
Commissioner Markham?
Yes.
Commissioner Woodbury?
Yes.
Commissioner Markovich?
Yes.
And Commissioner Knight?
Yes, that motion carries. We look forward to seeing a project move forward. Again, just for the audience, anytime we approve this type of motion, they still have to come back to us with the formal proposal, and you'll have another opportunity to speak and to have an opportunity to review whatever proposal.
Commissioner,
they
this one actually goes to the City Council,
yeah.
so they do have another opportunity to speak for all of these general plan zone amendments.
That's true.
Regardless of what happens here tonight, well, I guess not regardless, because if it wasn't forwarded, but if it gets forwarded to the City Council, it still comes up to the City Council. And just like the one that was talked about earlier, the dental office, we had forwarded a recommendation, and the City Council then denied that. So this is the first part of the process. The City Council is the second. So, and then after that, any potential projects would come to us.
Yeah. So, thank you. All right. Item number 7 and 8 will be heard together. I have a feeling that's why most of you are here. This is Kimball Associates seeking a general plan amendment from commercial development to mixed use and a zoning map amendment from general commercial to mixed use at the property address 4670 South 900 East. Is that applicant here this evening?
Yes.
Okay, we'll have you up in a few moments. Mr. Hall.
Thank you. As you said, this is a dual application just like the previous application, general plan amendment and zone map amendment. This is the Kmart, people commonly know it as the Kmart property. This is just west of 9th East. This is an arm of the city. To the south is Murray City, but to the east, north, and west are all Mill Creek City. It is 10.5 acres. It's in the CD zone currently, like Ivy Place Shopping Center to the south, and some of the, and I misspoke, there are a couple of properties to the north that are actually still in Murray as well, but some Mill Creek as well. It is in the CD zone, like the Ivy Place Shopping Center and the CubeSmart building to the north. This is the future land use map section. As you see, it is in the general commercial area. To the south, we have some professional office we've been talking about a bit here tonight, but most of that area is in the general commercial future land use map designation. Hence the request to put it in the mixed use land use map designation that you can see highlighted there in the graphic. The property is also zoned CD commercial. There's not a zoning map up tonight, but again, all the property in that area is zoned CD. A couple of shots of that 10 acres. Most of that 10.5 acres is parking lot. There is the large Kmart building and a couple of smaller pad buildings, the Meineke and the Java Hut. That's in the top shot you can see there. Lower you can see that there's an easement that runs across the property that they share with Ivy Place for some access. It actually goes into the west neighborhood that's in Mill Creek as well. We did have some calls about that, whether that would stay open in a new development, if it would be closed off. And the basic answers we don't know. The engineering division and Susan, our researcher extraordinaire, will be looking into the actual history of that access and its easement and its use over the years, and we'll try to make a determination in anticipation of some sort of development coming forward. But at the current moment, all we're considering are the general map amendments and the zone map amendments. We do not have plans, we don't have a site development to look at, so we can't answer any questions like that. So what we've advised the folks that called during the couple of weeks that the notices have been out about it. So I'm just making you aware of that. So you can see that that access there, or that easement that runs, that's right in this area. You can really kind of clearly see it. It does get used quite a bit. When I was up taking photographs on the side, I saw half a dozen cars coming in and out of the neighborhood, just so you're aware. Kmart building is empty at this point. I wanted to put this slide up too to kind of drive home the point that we make in the staff report to you as a planning commission, that the area is kind of, although it's not mixed uses on certain sites, there's a mix of uses in the area. There's residential, single family, there's multifamily residential, there are storage units, there are commercial uses, there are offices. It's all present. So staff does feel like it's a good site for mixed-use development. The general plan, although it doesn't specifically list the mixed-use zone as a zone that's connected to that general commercial designation, the general commercial designation's purpose statement and intent statements talk about the future including higher density multifamily housing as a component of new commercial developments. And we recognize that as a staff as well. The Planning Commission recognized that when we were looking at the general plan of the City Council. And so that language stayed in, although the zone itself was not attached to that designation, hence the request to change the designation. Just wanted to run through the findings really briefly with you as a group. These are in support of our recommendation to approve both the general land use map amendment and the zone map amendment. The redesignation of that future land use map amendment for the subject property was as requested, is in keeping with the patterns of development in the area. We just talked about that with that aerial photograph, which currently includes a mix of residential and commercial uses. The proposed amendment of the zoning map from CD commercial development to mixed use is supported by the description and intent statements for the general commercial land use designation, which recognizes the appropriateness of mixed use developments, including high density multifamily housing in the general commercial designation. And finally, the requested amendments to the future land use map and zoning map have been carefully considered based on the characteristics of the site and surrounding area and on the policies and objectives of the 2017 Murray City General Plan. And we find them to be in harmony with the goals of the general plan. We feel like it's a good site for mixed use. The developers are talking about horizontal mixed use, which would mean pad sites out on 9th East, probably for commercial uses and multifamily housing as well. So, but again, we don't have plans to talk about tonight. We just have the general plan amendment and the zone map amendment. Do you have any questions for staff at this point?
Questions for staff?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we've got the applicant come up, please. Good evening. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
David Kimball, 1000 South Main Street, Salt Lake City.
All right, Mr. Kimball, why should we consider this?
Well, we feel like, first of all, the big box stores that are becoming non-existent, except for like Costco's and things like that. But we feel like this zoning, there's a sliver of Murray City right in there. You have storage units on the north side, and you have commercial on the west side. But we feel like with this mixed use, with some commercial out in front with pad sites, that this, and with the access off of 9th East as well as access off to Van Winkle, that the traffic can carry this very well. Plus, we feel that it will enhance the city with the aesthetics, and it's going to be a quality project.
Okay. Questions for the applicant?
Mr. Kimball, is there any kind of a time frame in your mind if this were to be approved? You know, how far along are you conceptually with what might come before us eventually?
Yes, I think, as noted, we don't have a site plan as with the drawings and what type it's going to be as of yet, but it's. I think once you see it, it's going to have it's going to contain its own parking. It's going to be a use that will be well received. The timeline is that once it's approved, we'll immediately get our site plan approved. Once that's approved, depending on whether we'll start immediately. We are looking to have a good partnership where we can have a quality project, but we can start at a time that's appropriate as far as weather conditions and also how the zoning plays out.
All right, we'll probably bring you back up in a bit here. Before I open the public comment, I will just refresh you on the rules. So if you're speaking as an individual, we'll give you 3 minutes. If you're representing a group of individuals, we'll give you 5 minutes. And again, we ask that you present new evidence. And at this point in time, we will open up a public hearing. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Kathleen Ayala, and I'm 739 Tina Way. My biggest concern is traffic with bringing in high-density residential. just up the street where he had pointed out, which is no longer on the map, but he had pointed out where he was doing residential, high-density residential that was just built. There's accidents weekly there. It's a blind spot. The road goes to 2-lane right at 45th South. That's also an accident area that goes to single lane down over to 13th East, which is crazy traffic all the way going up east on 45th. So the excessive traffic is a huge concern. Ivy Place has become our community, and we walk there, we shop there, and if you take that away from us, you're cutting us off from the community.
Ivy
and
Place is,
I know
yes,
you're
not
not
subject
taking
to
Ivy
you.
Place, but that easement, if that becomes blocked off, my biggest concern is we are now this pocket of Mill Creek surrounded by Murray, and we are cut off from our community. The shops where we shop at, the people we support, we go to Carew. I don't even know if you guys know what Carew is, but I guarantee they've been there since Ivy Place has opened. We know them by name, and to take this away, to make it a high-density residential is detrimental to our community. And I guarantee if you go door to door, every single person will say that. We don't need more traffic there. We need more community.
Thank you. Yep, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Lloyd Inamoto. I'm at 4628 South Green Valley Drive. And I've been a resident there since 1963 when the place went in. When the Kmart plan was initially approved, developed and approved, the easement going from our subdivision to 9th East was a part of that development. And as best I understand, that is something that was intended to be held inviolate. And so as a result, the easement, number one, access, without that, we have only one way in and out of the subdivision.
And it's a right turn only.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And we have difficulty with emergency services as it is. So the other concern is, once again, the high-density housing. As previously mentioned, we are in a geographically isolated pocket. As you can see by the maps, above the storage area goes uphill and is actually a geographically separate area than the subdivision itself. If we lost the easement, we would be really, really isolated, as Kathleen was saying. And number two, the high density aspect, housing aspect, is something that I think does not fit within the community. And I believe that these folks would be willing to look at low density or even medium density housing, but I'm afraid that the high density housing is going to end up putting such a large population into that small geographic location that is somewhat isolated by Van Winkle as well, that is going to create problems for the residents that are currently there. So I think my two concerns are the easement and the high density housing portion.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just real quick. So regarding the easement.
Name and address, please.
Excuse me, Julie Clements, and I'm at 4637 South Namba Way. I contacted a title company and asked them to run a title search on the address of 4670 South 900 East. Apparently there is no easement on record. There is not a cross-access easement. There is not an access easement, nor is there a roadway easement. However, they did find a reciprocal access agreement on file. So that's just something that's for your GWIS.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Come on. Good evening.
Hi, my name is David Murphy. I live at 809 East, 4680 South. Just a few things for the record. I'm not against progress. Okay, I'm not against the commercial property being next to mine. My house is the first house behind Kmart. We go into that easement we've been discussing.
My school bus stop as a kid. It was my school bus stop, yeah.
Yeah, but the kids stand out in front of my house. I always tell them to come stand underneath the awning and everything when it's snowing and raining. But my concern is that currently we have 17 apartment complex within a 3-mile radius of that corner right there where I live. If we already have 17 apartment complexes, why do we need one more? This is not about aesthetics. This is about money. Let's be honest about that. The things that I am concerned with, the depreciation of our homes. You're going to build probably at least a 2 or 3 story 400-unit building, and people are going to be looking out their back porch into my backyard. Not to mention everybody else that lives down the entire length of Kmart, across the street from me, and then going back into that PUD subdivision right behind them. There's a whole privacy issue there. There will be no privacy. Not even if you put up a 10-foot fence, there won't be any privacy. The other thing is have we done an environmental impact survey? That many additional people living in such a small area adjacent to the creek that runs through right there by Abbey Place. Has anybody looked at that? Have we looked at, or do we currently have the infrastructure for domestic water, firefighting, sewer? I mean, are all these things being looked at prior to even discussing whether they're going to rezone this? So those are some of my things. And then last but not least is how is it going to really affect my property value? So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Sandra Gary. I live at 4687 Namba Way, right across the street from David. Our house is the first house on the left as you come in through that road. And I ditto everything that everybody said. That was my concern, was the congestion, the crime, but also our letter that we received about this meeting tonight was dated July 5th. Who works on the 5th of July? Who's paying attention on the 5th of July? And we didn't even open our mail until a couple of days ago when we found this notice, and we were scrambling to talk to our neighbors, and everyone we talked to was against this change. We don't want that. In fact, my husband even said, why don't we have a park there, an urban park, which would be so much more beneficial. We have nowhere in that neighborhood to go, you know, and it's just like, it would be, we don't need more commercial, we don't need more apartments. And that space and the property value. There was American Community Survey said that when there's apartments by the residents, it decreases the property value by 13.8%. Another point. Thank you.
Thanks. Surely there's more of you. Come on up. Hello?
Mary and Gary, 4687 Maple Way. As far as the easement goes, I believe that when I purchased my property a long time ago, the owners to that property said they fought very hard to get that easement, and that easement is tied to my property. And we don't want to see that easement going away. That easement is needed. As we stated before, with emergency equipment trying to come in one way, even right now when we call for police, we don't know if the Murray police are coming out, we don't know if the Salt Lake City police are coming out, we don't know, because they're all saying, this is your property, this is your property, this is your property, and nobody wants to take authority and say, hey, we're going to be the ones that come out anytime there's an emergency. And we need to have that dealt with too, also. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, we'll do our best to try to keep the overall volume down just because we're recording everything and we want our people to be able to get an accurate record.
Hi.
Hi.
Doni Tagipur. I live on 4642 South, Xenia Meadows Court. I live in the northwest corner of Kmart, so my view, like my whole view, it's the behind Kmart. And I don't know if you guys have that view, but people have sex back there, people do drugs back there. And if you do a park back there, it's just going to be more comfortable for them to do it. And I've had syringes in my backyard, and I have a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. So I just want something done with it.
Thank you.
Well, at least that'll be a prettier surrounding.
Sir, we'll ask that you please not yell out. Hello.
Jeff Childs, 4617 Namba Way. My question is, what kind of density are you talking about as far as high density? Are you talking like Sugar House with the 11-story condos with the retail space on the first 2 floors?
Okay, well, we will address all these questions individually afterwards, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Okay, I'm going to close public comment. All right, yes, please, yep.
Hi, my name is Christopher Watson. I'm at 4637 South, Green Valley Drive. I appreciate all the comments that have been brought up by my neighbors and fellow residents. And just wanted to point out that I reiterate all that they have said: traffic, land use, additional apartments. I wish I could have put together a map to show you just how dense the apartments are in the area. And I believe the statement in regards to the unknowns and all the unknown factors of what will actually happen at this location prove in itself that it's not ready to be voted on and it's not ready to go forward. The idea of what will be there and also the new information on the possibility of that easement going away, I believe, and I'd like to think that that would be within code to not have just one access, especially with only a right northbound whatever area to go out of. That poses a great risk to all of our services and ability to get out in case if there was a fire or any incident. We're already riddled with the apartments and traffic and vacuum barriers and walkability, and to take away from our community, I just believe that it's not quite ready to go forward. I don't believe this is a not in my backyard situation. We need more information before it can go forward. Thank you.
Thanks. Good evening.
I'm Wendy Fagery, 4705 Green Valley Drive. I agree with everything that's been said, and I'm not opposed to having some kind of development in this area, but I am worried about our road disappearing, and I also am worried about the quality of life for our children. We don't need more apartments. My kids went through schools where their friends were moving all the time, things were constantly turning over. We need some kind of consistency in our lives, and I think most people here would agree with me on that. So we're not opposed to some kind of development, but couldn't it be lower density, something that would have people stay more permanently in the area? Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment. And Mr. Hall, bring it back up for a minute.
So I will, thank you, and I'll do my best to kind of address some of the things that were talked about from our end. So the concerns about traffic, and I'll just kind of take these all as one and let that kind of segue into more conversation about it. Traffic is a concern with any new development, whether it was commercial or whether it was a mixed-use project like this. So if this were being proposed tonight without a zone change, as a movie theater and a couple of new restaurant pads or something, traffic would be a concern. And we will address that concern the exact same way that we will in this case, and that is to say, when the development comes through for a site plan approval or a planned unit development approval or a conditional use approval of some kind, we would address those traffic concerns. And that means that we take into account there'd be a traffic study for any kind of development on this property for certain. That's one aspect we need to do. We don't typically see those for zone changes, and there was a mention just recently of needing more details to move forward. I have to respectfully disagree with that. We don't do zone changes based on a particular development. We look at the potentials of the zone that's being requested, and those potentials versus the potentials of the existing zone, and then try to make the right decision. And that's the task of the Planning Commission. So that's kind of what you're up against with saying, well, what is it? And then when you tell us what the development is, then we'll say, yes, you can have the zone and approve it. We do not do that, and no one should. And when I say no one, I mean a municipality, a government entity. We did actually send notices not just to folks that own properties in the area, but also to what we call affected entities. That would mean the sewer improvement districts, water suppliers, power supply, emergency services. Everyone gets copies of these notices. We didn't receive responses from any secondary providers or those affected entities. That is not uncommon. They do zone changes much the same way we do. They know they're going to get notices about the future development too, and they'll contact us when it's time to talk about the capacity. Talking about capacities, there was a lot of talk about traffic. We just mentioned traffic studies. So that's the kind of thing that's going to limit the density, and there was a mention of density. What kind of density are we talking about? We're talking about high density housing in the mixed use zone. And the terrible and short answer is it depends. The only thing that limits density in the mixed use zone are the constraints of the site itself. So that would include the traffic that's available. The traffic study comes out and tells us what we can do to ameliorate traffic problems. There's only so much we can do. How many accesses we have available in and out of the property, that's going to dictate how many units can go in there. So there is not a number that I can tell you, 20 units the acre, 30 units the acre, etc. But as far as that goes, that's how we handle density in the mixed use zone. We deal with the infrastructure that's available and the site constraints that exist. And in this case, we don't know what that would mean. It'll also depend on how much land they want to use for commercial development as well. And they do definitely want to do commercial development. They're required to do commercial development in association with high density residential in the mixed use zone. In the commercial zone that exists there, they can develop the property in many different ways. In the mixed use zone, they can develop it in several additional ways, and those ways just include the inclusion of mixed use, higher density housing as well. So we would deal with the density question that way as well. Somebody mentioned community, and I underlined some notes I had several times. Nobody cares about that more than planners. We really agree with you on that point. We would like to see this community that you have. I mean, as planner, I'm just speaking as a planner at this point, so I'm not speaking for developers or anybody else, but we don't want to see isolated communities. We like to connect them. So there's going to be, as the site plan comes forward, you're going to see a lot of different opinions about whether that connection should continue to exist or whether it should go away. We have to look at site plans to know whether that's appropriate or not. We definitely don't want to cut anyone off from community aspects, third places, places that they're used to going, businesses they're used to patronizing. We want you to still be able to do that. We need to look at that carefully as things go forward, and I'm sure that the developers will be willing to look at that too. To that end, we also have to look at emergency services. So any plan that gets reviewed for development on this property, whether it was commercial or mixed use, if the zone has changed and it's a mixed use development, we'll look at emergency services as well, and they'll need to weigh in on that. How can we provide good emergency services to the new development, but also to the existing area that is kind of isolated, Namba Way and Green Valley and all those streets. That all has to be taken into account. We did receive, the Planning Commission received an emailed letter from your council person, and I've forgotten her name, but she asked us to please keep the Mill Creek side things in the process as things move forward, and we would definitely want to do that. We don't, when we're looking at zone changes and things like that, we're not as concerned with the boundary of the city as here, so we don't want to hear what you say. We definitely want to hear from the community and try to make sure that things match up. So we would definitely do that going forward. I'm sure I can speak to the commission on that note. We want to be have Mill Creek be a part of that conversation. There's a lot of things that go along with this. I appreciate it. Thank you. So Melinda Greenwood just arrived, and she's doing double duty on her way back into town from being out of town on conferences, so thanks for stopping. Melinda forwarded that email on to the community development staff in Mill Creek as well. So they're aware of this. I know that Zach and Frank Lilly have been talking about it as well. We'll definitely keep looping people into that, and that'll include other service providers too, because a lot of Murray services are not here in this area as well. So with that said, we do still feel like the property is a good property for mixed-use development if that mixed-use development is done right, and there's not a staff that is more committed to trying to do mixed-use development right than we are. So we'll keep that in mind going forward.
Mr. Hall, can I just, sorry to interrupt you really fast, but
You're good.
I wish that some people in the audience had this chart that we have in front of us, because it talks about what is allowed in the CD zone as it's currently zoned and what would be allowed in the mixed use zone. And some of the things that it talks about is, like, in the CD zone, there's buffers and things like that, but only like if it's abutting like residential. But in the mixed use zone, there's a 15% minimum coverage required as open space to include amenities. So when we're talking about community, that zone definitely has things written into it that support that more than a CD zone, as well as there's just standard sidewalks and park strips. But in the mixed use zone, it has wider sidewalks, larger park strips, paved sidewalks with tree wells, street trees and street furnitures, benches, bicycle racks are required. So it's a move towards a more neighborhood walkability community zone, much more than the CD zone that it currently is right now.
That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. It's back to that same point of community. There's the mixed use zone is actually much more leaned heavily into community aspects
and has requirements to meet some of those expectations.
It's a great point. Thank you for making that. One other quick thing, just Jim was reminding me, there's that we'll be looking at that. It was mentioned there's a reciprocal agreement for parking for access. We'll be looking into all of that as the site development goes forward. And there'll be more notices that get sent out for the zone change goes forward to City Council. There are notices that are sent out for that as well. And there are notices that would go out for development in the mixed use zone as well. So we would expect to see all of you. Yeah, so there'll be future notices as well. And if you ever have questions, you're welcome to just call us and ask anytime. So that goes as well. Are there any other questions that I can answer for the
I'd just like to ask you a question. In my mind, what we are looking at present right there is really what the future would be if something isn't done proactively. Right. Due to the commercial activity in that area, the existing zone cannot compete with the existing retail and all of the other activities that are there. If we don't do anything, I think that the odds are that this property will continue to languish.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the other possibilities for boxes like this that go empty is that they get repurposed, they get carved up into smaller boxes. It's had a few years to have that done, and that's been passed over by the development community. So,
and one other question, I heard just a small comment in the back. Would like a park there. I would like nothing more than a park there. I'm a Parks and Recreation major. I retired from Murray City as a Parks and Recreation employee. I would love nothing more than that. The city does not have the money to purchase this property and take it off the commercial tax rolls and turn it into a park. That's just simply not going to happen.
And you're going to be hard-pressed to find a private developer that's just going to, out of their kindness of their heart, take a piece of property this size and turn it into a public park. That's just the harsh reality. The only way you're going to get around that is to buy the piece of property and do it yourself. And let's face it, none of us in this room can afford to do that. So,
well, maybe you don't know what they do.
That's true. I'm sorry. I know I can't.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I hear all these comments and I agree with a lot of them, but it's not within our authority. I don't own it.
I mean, that's really one of the hardest things. Phil and I have been on the commission for going on 7.5 years, and Mayor and I know many years. And I would say almost every application that comes forward, people say, "Well, I want a community garden, I want a park, I want this." They want something that enhances their life, which we all do. I live in a neighborhood where a bunch of new developments coming in, and it's increased traffic, and that's part of living in a more urban setting. But unfortunately, parks aren't profitable for the developers and the owners. I mean, I don't want to, if I'm actually building a house, and I can't knock down my old house and just put it in as a park. It's not viable. And it's the same thing for everybody, is if you own the property, you can do something with it. We all want parks, we all want green space, and I think the city does an excellent job trying to maintain as much green space as possible.
And those same statements apply to a lower density. I don't own the property, I can't apply for lower density. We have to work with the owners.
Anything else for staff?
I think you covered the bulk of what I have on here. So.
Jared, do you have any more on the easement? I mean, the one lady said she checked with the property here, and it said there was reciprocal. So just the reciprocal.
The question I would have about that is to whom it applies.
Right. Well, and then there was the other comment about the gentleman who said that the easement was associated with his home as well.
Right, and that could very well be the case.
Okay.
And we'll have to keep looking into that. We've started, but we haven't. That'll be a longer process. And I'm sure the developers are looking at that too. Like I said, and Commissioner Patterson mentioned too, while we can't do park space here necessarily, there are better options to create at least walkable environments. And disconnecting iPads that Zach will fix real quick. In the mixed-use zone than there are in the CDs.
Zach, what kind of music are you listening to?
Those are just suggested songs. Those
Based on your preferences.
Those aren't Zach's songs.
But we hope that a mixed-use
Linda, you gotta watch
some
that.
of those things and be nice. So.
Well, I think it's safe to say that we all share the concern about the easement.
Definitely.
And anything that were to happen in the future, that's probably that, obviously that in density and traffic flow. That's got to be number one.
Absolutely.
And it was the most common comment tonight, I believe, just by my tally, and it was far and away the most common comment I received by email and phone over last week.
I agree with that.
And Jared, just for a little bit more clarification for those of us that don't speak this language daily, the problem with the easement, why we're vague about the easement right now, is we have to figure out who owns it, what parties are involved, what their intent is. We don't know if we have authority or not at this point.
Correct, and we'll have to hammer that. We would go forward with a zone change because that easement would be in place. That easement or its existence or its status or who it applies to, or all of that is the way it is right now, and it would be that way in the CD zone, and it will be exactly the same way in the MU zone if we change the zone. So I don't want to say it's not relevant because it is, but it's not relevant to whether it's zoned one thing or the other. It's not less likely. You're not less likely to have an access maintained there with a mixed-use development than you are with a commercial development. Maybe the other way around, because a mixed-use development would contain residential uses as well, where you get a theater or somebody in there and they're just going to want to close that off. It just depends. So going forward for a site plan development, a conditional use permit to allow an actual development to occur, we've got to hammer that out. For the zone change, we don't know. It's still probably okay for staff to say, let's move forward.
And when it comes before the city council, there might be more information. You might have figured out more things about the easement, or so, and people would have the opportunity to come back and.
Sure, we'll have 30 days or so to know more about that at that point as well.
Right. Like you said, it wouldn't affect today's discussion.
Today's discussion is probably not important. It's going to remain the same anyway.
Okay. I don't think I have any additional questions for the applicant. Does anybody have any additional questions for the applicant before we move forward? Okay, so then at this point in time, I'm willing to either entertain a motion or have further discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I will make a recommendation that we forward a recommendation of make a motion that we forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment to the general plan future land use map, redesignating the property located at 4670 South, 900 East from general commercial to mixed use.
I will second that.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Woodbury and a second by Mr. Markham to forward a recommendation of approval of the City Council for the requested amendments to the general plan future land use map, redesignating the property located at 4670 South, 900 East from general commercial to mixed use. Second, I will entertain a motion or further discussion.
We need a vote on that one.
Oh, yeah, I guess that helps, doesn't it? Sorry. Thanks.
Yes.
Mr. Markham?
Yes.
Ms. Patterson?
Yes.
Ms. Mulcahy?
Yes.
Mr. Knapp?
Yes. Okay, that motion carries. Now I will entertain more conversation or a motion.
Just before, I'll make a motion on this one, but I want to thank everyone for coming out, because it is so important that we understand the issues, that they're on public record, because this is the first step. But not only is it the first step, but it's also helping everybody to understand the issues. The developers here, it's an opportunity for them to understand the importance of the easement, sense of community, and in my time on the commission, we've seen developers take those things into account, especially when they come back with developments and proposed projects. They do factor in those things, and so staff always does a great job at weighing the options of development versus destroying communities. I've never seen them purposely destroy a community, not on purpose. But anyway, so I just appreciate you guys coming and appreciate the work with staff. But with that, I guess any other comments? Okay. I'll make a motion that we forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designation of the property located at 4670 South, 900 East, from CD Commercial Development to MU Mixed Use.
Motion by Mr. Woodbury to forward a recommendation of approval to City Council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designation of the property located at 4670 South, 900 East, from CD Commercial Development to MU Mixed Use. Patterson, call for vote, please.
Mr. Woodbury?
Yes.
Ms. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Markham?
Yes.
Ms. McKay?
Yes. Motion carries. Again, you'll receive notice. Go to the City Council, and if they approve it and we move forward with the plan, we welcome you back, because we will see you again. All right, item number 9 is...
We'll just let people...
Yeah, let them drift for a minute. We'll let you drift.
You can have a
for
drink.
minute.
With 3 general in a row, like general plan, that's too many for one meeting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It is.
You know what, they were
With
good crap.
seating and everything, it's just too many.
Yeah, no, I agree. They're very
You know,
Mhm.
we will have an immediate comparison here.
Yeah.
But the last 2 items are super short.
Lots of seats opening up for those if you're still stuck outside. All right, I'm going to move us forward. So item number 9 this evening is the Salt Lake Neighborhood Housing Services seeking a zoning map amendment from A1 Agriculture to R18 Residential at the property address 871 Trip Lane. Is that applicant here this evening? Okay, we'll have you up in just a moment. Mr. Hall.
Thank you. This is just a zone change amendment tonight. The other 2 items, the general plan in place on this property, just over, let's see, 2.78 acres, I want to say. 2.78 acres. Undeveloped, there's a currently an existing residential home there, an old home and a structure, not currently occupied. Trip Lane on the north, that you can see, my finger's not working. Trip Lane on the north, the neighborhood to the south, there is a dead-end street that's not Glen Oak Drive, it's Willow Grove Lane. Our GIS mapping is out of date for some reason. At any rate, this 2.78 acres is available for development. It is currently zoned agriculture, A1. The general plan maps future land use map calls for it to be low density residential. That would support R110, R18, R16. The actual request is for R18. That matches more of the surrounding actual zoning. And the lot sizes are typically about 8,000 square feet in this area as well. So that request has been made for that R18 zone. It is for the purposes of doing a subdivision. Again, like the previous application, we don't have a subdivision in front of us. We don't have a concept development subdivision or anything like that either. We just know that they want to subsequently subdivide it. Looking at the property from that sort of road that runs around the ball diamond back, looking west at the property, you can see it there, and then looking north, you can see the little, the old home there, and the power lines in the distance. Again, we did find that the rezoning matches the surrounding area. It's consistent with the general plan and with the goals of the general plan to provide that same kind of housing in that area. So we are in support as a staff of amending the amending the zoning map from A1 to R18. With that said, I just want to make one comment before we move on to public comments so that you're aware. And I did make you aware of it in the pre-meeting, but I wanted to restate it for the public. So this property, again, as I said, we don't have a subdivision in front of us, so we have not yet dealt with the idea of access to the property and where it cul-de-sacs, or how far in it cul-de-sacs, or if it goes all the way through. Those are all questions that we did receive by email and by the phone after the notices went out. We aren't prepared in any way to answer those for you as a commission. I apologize, but we don't have a subdivision in front of us, and we won't until after the zone is changed.
Any questions for Mr. Hall? No? All right.
Thank you.
We can have the applicant up. Good evening.
Good evening.
Name and address for the record.
My name is Bob Lund. I'm at 6194 South Cristo Circle in Taylorsville.
All right. Why is Neighborhood Works coming to Murray City to rezone this property?
we'd like to, we purchased the property and we'd like to develop it into some building lots.
Any questions for the applicant?
In our pre-meeting, there was some discussion that NeighborWorks tries to build somewhat affordable housing in that. Can you expand on that, and would this be a candidate for something like that?
Unfortunately, it would not. We do have an office located in Murray on Poplar Street, and we are involved in purchasing homes and rehabilitating them. We've built, it's a challenge for us to find property in Murray that is affordable to meet the requirements for affordability for the CDBG or low-income housing.
What is that current price point?
It's 80% below the area median income.
So it's increased recently. The HUD requirements for lending have increased. I believe our area is approximately 390,000 up to. So that's, compared to a decade ago, gone up quite a bit.
Yeah.
So they do try to provide those opportunities, but we are a partner with NeighborWorks in Murray City, where they work with us trying to find properties that are challenged to clean them up, make them affordable, and get families into our neighborhood. We have new families into Murray. We have one they did just directly east of us by the ballpark. That's a real success that they did just last year here on Vine Street and brought a new family to our city.
That's a tremendous success. That was a huge problem house.
Yes. And it was, and so they offer grants, they do remodeling and sales, and they do loans for rehabilitation for people that need new roofs or their foundation is settling, things of that nature. So they are a great partner in our community. They just happen to be the owner of this particular property at this point in time that they would like to subdivide.
And this just helps with future efforts.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. I guess there's no additional questions for you, so we'll open this up for public comment. Same rules, 1 or 3 minutes if you're speaking as an individual, 5 minutes if you're representing a group of individuals. Oh,
come on,
okay,
Kevin.
I'm going to move forward. Oh, do I? Oh, perfect.
I don't want to let it go too far before we go up. I'm just wondering, the individual that...
Yeah, can you state your... I'm sorry, say your name.
Bob Toon, 836 West Tripp Lane. I'm curious as to, and I don't totally understand, is why the developer who got the property and we develop it into a, is it low income or is it?
No. So this will be market rate housing.
Market rate housing, yeah. Okay, because I was going to say, because depending on, from what I'm hearing, it's not a property that needs to be lifted up. I mean, I think you could sell that property on the market for going rate, and you could, sell the product and build on there for, I mean, whoever wants to spend the money to put it on there. So, okay, I just didn't understand exactly how that was, because I didn't want it to impact our property value of the homes. But if that doesn't do that, great. And one other comment is, and I don't know how we do this, but with that area, depending on how they open up the streets, there's a parking issue with the school there. And I really like how they've added the parking lot to the west of the school and opened that up about 10 years ago. But there's also a berm of grass there that could be still taken out and more parking be added. And also with Viewmont, is that looked at all with the houses coming in? And with that, I mean, it's an issue with the parking with the ball diamonds and everything there. Can that be looked at the same time?
These are all good questions, but they're related to the next step in the process, which would be the review of the subdivision plat.
Okay.
NeighborWorks is the property owner, but it's likely that they will get the property subdivided and recorded and sell those lots to other builders at market rate. So we all know in Murray that the housing prices just keep going up and up and up. And so we have new construction throughout the city that's in the 5s, the 6s, and the 7s, and this is probably likely to occur in this area as well. But those are all good questions. Those are things that have been discussed very preliminarily, but we can't, this is not the forum. The next set of meetings would, here at this level, at Planning Commission, would be the forum for those questions and answers.
Perfect. And I know that they don't direct what happens to the roads and the parking, but it's an issue with it as that comes in, however we can bring that up to get that addressed. So, thank you.
I mean, Jim, isn't it fair to say, though, that all things are considered when an application does? We look at traffic, we look at impact and all the surrounding areas. And so it's not something that we can say, yes, today we will consider that berm and that parking, because there's no application, so you wouldn't look at the impact. But you can rest assured that they will look at all aspects around it. The city engineer looks at it, emergency services, planning, all aspects of the city look at how any proposed development affects the surrounding areas.
We have a development review committee that includes about 15 or 16 city employees from all different departments, all different aspects, looking at every review and on providing comments before anything can move forward.
Yes.
Sir.
Hi. Sam Johnson, 917 West Bloomsbury, just directly west of this particular property. And I support the change for zoning. Do it quickly, please. Let's get this done. As you may remember, back last summer, the Murray property directly to the north caught on fire and nearly burned up the property subject here, which almost burned up our property. And then, so let's get her done.
Okay.
What?
Being empty.
It's not good. Yep, it's never any good.
Hello.
Hi, Jim Livingston, 5859 Willow Grove Lane. So the dead-end road that was pointed out on the map.
Trip lane and the poorly named road.
Yeah, so so we own a 5-foot strip of land in front of that road. Is this up for consideration of having the road go through there?
Yeah, not tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, we have no formal proposal before us, so other than to change the zone.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I am going to close the public comment and bring it back up here for discussions. I don't know that we have anything for Mr. Hall to address on this one.
But just something just to consider that's, I mean, I know many of these people here in attendance, and the development that's going down just down the road where the barns were, the Circle Stables, there were a lot of the similar concerns when that came in. And I mean, I actually know the developer very, very well. And he would ask me about different things, and I'd say talk to staff because I'm not smart enough, but they are. But if you look at what's happened, there was concern initially with that a road would go all the way through from Bullion to, and the staff looks at it, they work with all the departments, and they come up with a compromise. And that compromise that works now that's been developed is that cul-de-sac on one side and 3 on the other. And so I have full faith and trust that the staff will work with the developer to ensure the optimal solution for traffic flow, lot size, all that. I've seen it multiple times throughout the city, and especially just down the road on this one.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a recommendation that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designation for the property located at 871 West Trip Lane from A1 Agriculture to R18 Single Family Residential.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Markham to forward a recommendation of approval of the City Council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designation for the property located at 871 West Trip Lane from A1 Agriculture to R18 Single Family Residential. Do I have a second?
I'd like to second that.
Second by Ms. Milkevich. Call for a vote, please.
Mr. Markham?
Yes.
Ms. Milkevich?
Yes.
Ms. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Woodbury?
Yes.
Mr. Ney?
Yes, motion carries. Good luck at City Council, and you guys will all be noticed again.
I'm sure
and have an
we'll
opportunity
see you again, yes.
to show up. All right.
And really, to your point, that's the next time that you really get that great input is if the City Council passes it, and then you see the layout, and then you have more ability to influence things there. So.
All right. Item number 10 this evening is the Murray Central Station Small Area Plan consideration for adoption as an amendment to the Murray City General Plan. Mr. Hall.
Thank you. So as you noted, this is an application to amend the Murray General Plan, the Murray City General Plan that was adopted in May 2017, to include this small area plan that actually the Planning Commission reviewed and forwarded a recommendation to the City Council to approve back in February, late in February this year. After some consideration, the City Council reviewed it and liked the plan, but felt like we ought to adopt it, working with the Attorney's Office, that we ought to adopt it as a part of the, as an amendment to the general plan, as opposed to just adopting the plan and having it as a separate entity. So we've brought it back to you tonight for that consideration. I did prepare a few slides just to briefly go back over it. We did renotice public, make a notice to the public. During the process, I wanted to just really quickly state just some background. This plan was done with a grant from the Wasatch Front Regional Council as a part of what's called the Transportation Land Use Connection Plan, or sorry, Transportation Land Use Connection Grant Program. We worked with a consultant to go through the plan and prepare it for adoption. The study area is what's shown to the right there. It's quite a large area around the station itself, which is located right here. And the reason that we looked for a grant to do this study and to prepare this plan was because our general plan, the 2017 Murray City General Plan, did identify certain areas of the city that would benefit from small area plans, more fine-grained studies, and some more in-depth looking at them. So the first one that we thought would be appropriate was the Murray Central Station, where the two lines, the two transit lines that run through the main corridor of the valley, north to south, the TRAX line and the commuter rail line, kind of meet at that same station. It's one of only 3 stations on the line where that happens, and the only one outside of Salt Lake City proper where that happens. Just over 10,000 people a day go through this station. That might be higher now. That was a couple of years ago when we first started looking at the plan. So we felt like it was a good place to start. It's also close by to our Murray City downtown area that we hope to see redevelopment occurring in, as you're all aware, and then close to lots of mixed-use areas on the west side of the tracks in this area here, and the hospital right there. So we felt like it was a good place to start. Just a quick review of the purpose of the project. They wanted to, these were identified by the steering committee and the consultants group as we looked at this. We felt like it was important to assess the built environment and the development conditions. We spent, a majority of the study actually does exactly that. It was to give us a better understanding of what we could and couldn't do in this area, what was viable and not viable, what we should move forward looking at. Felt like it was, along those same lines, important to understand the physical environmental implications of the smelter site overlay district. We'll get into that in just a second on a second slide here. As you're aware, this is where the stacks were. There was a smelting operation that caused a lot of contamination, so that site's still active. Assess the market potential and the possibilities of creating a mixed-use transit district located in this emerging urban center. That's relating to our downtown that we're trying to revitalize, and the pole that is the hospital, etc. It was important for us to understand the connections and the access to and from the station area for vehicles, for transit, for active transportation, people walking, people biking. We didn't have a good handle on how easy it was or not to get in and out of this area. And then to provide policies and ideas to ensure that future planning and development was based on good understanding of those conditions and our opportunities. To all that extent, we created these sort of, the word is escaping me, but they're summarized here. These principles, thank you. So these are the principles that came out of all of that work. That's a longer read. I wanted to summarize them here. So the guiding principles were to align the planning and design of the station area itself with the Murray City General Plan vision. What that means in a real quick nutshell is that the station itself, that station property is owned by UTA and operated by UTA. It's kind of, it's its own entity, right? And there's not been a lot of connection to the area around it. It doesn't do a good job of doing that. The first identification was that we wanted to create principles and give ideas to UTA so that when they do redevelop that station, and one day they will, that it will relate to Murray better than it does right now, better than it did when they first threw it in. We needed to leverage investments in transit infrastructure to create a walkable activity center. It's not a very walkable area right now. All of the right zoning is in place, but not the right infrastructure, not the right bones for that. So we need to look at that. We need to balance the creation of a quality station with environmental constraints. Like I said, we have those big problems. And create a good station, great public spaces, Again, these kinds of things. The other thing that came out of this big study was that the station should be iconic. It's unique among the other transit stations. It's larger than a lot of them. It carries a lot of volume of traffic, a lot of different people going a lot of different places. If it were iconic and if we do the right things in this area, come to for other reasons instead of just passing through. That's our hope with this kind of a study. So we mentioned the smelter site overlay, and I'm just going to go quickly through a couple of the big tenets of the plan, just as review for you as you move it forward and for any comments that come up tonight. So the smelter site overlay district you can see in the midst of the study area. The study area is quite a bit larger, but the smelter site overlay area, where there are environmental concerns and constraints for development, is right there at the station itself. Now that's a problem for a transit station, because what you want to do with transit stations is put your highest density housing right there. And the nutshell of this is that we cannot do that. Residential properties or residential developments are not going to be allowed right on the station itself because of the environmental contamination and the situation as it is. We have to monitor those wells, and Jim could talk to you about this for half an hour or so if you wanted.
Probably not tonight, Jim.
Probably not tonight, right? But there are environmental concerns, to say the least, and that cap needs to remain in place. It can only be broken by certain kinds of development, and residential is not one of those. So what that meant was that our residential uses in this area that we still want to see happen would get pushed further out into the MCCD zone, into the mixed use zone that are on the fringes there that we talked about, outside of that smelter site area, in the Murray City downtown, and maybe to the west in the mixed use. A little further out than we would like from a transit station of this size, but we still want to, it's big enough that maybe it has enough gravity, enough pull to pull those pedestrians in still. So those environmental concerns, it's more important to protect that human health than it is to do what Jared wanted for the plan. So that's basically where we are. Key findings that came out of that, all of that work. The environmental study analysis eliminated residential development. We've already talked about that. Most of that area has to stay as it is. The station itself could be redeveloped. There's possibility for UTA to redesign the station, and we get to that at the very end of things. And we'll talk about that briefly. The other big thing that came out of it was that IMC is not really going to be, at this point in time anyway, they're not going to be a part of that planning. They're still holding their properties, and a lot of their property is highly contaminated, and any buildings on it would be parking structures or might be office buildings in the future, but they're not ready to say at this point. So that's another thing that came out of that. There are a lot of possibilities at the fringe of this area, though, in the greater study area, and we'll try to take advantage of those. The zoning is in place and is good for it. Vine Street needs to be changed. It's not a very pedestrian-friendly environment right now yet. As the station is redeveloped, it could become so, and that's part of the end result of this study as well. And to that point, item number 8, there are 2 alternative concepts for station area proposed. We'll talk about that more in just a second, but just an interesting point that came out of the economic analysis. There was a lot of market study work done for this area as well, to show us what would be viable and what we needed, what we did have, what we didn't have in the area. And there's a lot of data in the plan if you want to look at that. And I know you've all had access to the plan for a while. We have a link to it on the website, the city's website, if you ever want to see that. There's a lot of really fun data. But this is an interesting point that came out in the study, and we thought we ought to, just for fun, put it up tonight. In the study area itself, there are 12,298 jobs. Of those 12,298 jobs, only 66 people live in the area and work there. Of those jobs, only 66 of them live and work. 12,232 of them drive into or come into the station on the transit to work at those jobs that are in that study area. It's a larger area than just the station, but still that study area. If you take Murray City as a whole, it's a problem that's writ larger, and that's what we're trying to overcome with these transit studies or with our stationary studies. 40,803 jobs in the city, in Murray City. Of those, only 2,954 people of Murray live in Murray, work in Murray. That's our number that came out of that study. So kind of an interesting point. Too many people leaving the city to work. They ought to be staying in the city and working, or coming into the city to work. Now, a lot of people coming in, 37,000 people coming in, employed in the area and coming in from outside. That's a lot of people on your roads. When we talk about traffic, and just everybody's gone from the previous development, but we talk about traffic problems and congestion, and you cannot solve those by simply saying, we're not going to build anything new on this property. You solve those by doing this. You solve those by putting jobs where people already are. I won't preach anymore about that. The station itself, this is just a list of the assets that it has. High frequency, we already talked about that. That it is a busy area where the tracks and front runner buses are all together. It does have its challenges. The station is kind of brutal. The bus service is a little clunky as you move in and out of the station to the buses, etc. It doesn't relate to Vine Street at all. In fact, it's not even addressed on Vine Street, which is kind of a travesty. It's an interesting place. We can do a lot better in terms of the station itself. So we've gone through kind of the data that emerged from the study that sort of informs what we can do in the future. The guiding principles of transportation we already talked about, so I'm going to go ahead and skip this. We need to transform Vine Street into a better multimodal place, a more walkable area. And the station, when it's redeveloped, we have this plan, basically, the other principal thing it does is advise UTA that they ought to reconsider the way that they think about that station and how it relates to the environment around it. It needs to be a part of that area. To that end, we did, as a part of the plan, produce two different concepts. Concept one, and it's hard to kind of show big things in it, so I won't really try in desperation, but the main points are that, both of them, the station will orient more toward Vine Street than it does currently. We could add offices, we could add reasons for people to be here, employment centers that we desperately need in this area of the city, and the station could become a much better place. Bridges over the tracks that would take you to the west side that's developing as mixed use currently, and to the east side where there's going to be office development and even the people that work in the IHC Center here that come in all the time, and better access to Cottonwood and Vine Street. For people on foot coming up to the MCCD area that's going to be developing or redeveloping in the near future as well. The second concept does a lot of the same things, but in different ways. Provides less of a pedestrian bridge, covers the tracks, does other things. And these aren't, I need to reiterate, these aren't station designs that we are promoting and saying we're going to levy taxes next year to get these done. These are ideas for UTA to consider as they look at partnering with private developers to redo that station. The UTA board did adopt this plan. So they're a few months ahead of us in terms of adoption, but they've adopted the plan, they've accepted those kind of ideas and said, yeah, you're right, we need to reconsider the way we look at the station. With that said, again, staff is recommending, like we did in February, that we adopt, or that we forward, the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for adoption of the Murray Central Station Small Area Plan as an amendment to the Murray City General Plan. So the wording has changed a little bit, but the concepts are all still the same as they were back in February for you. Do you have any questions for staff at this point?
Jared, yeah. Several times in your presentation, we talk about giving UTA ideas and principles to, follow, and that's all we can do, right? They can still do pretty much whatever they want.
They do own a dozen acres or so in that area. They can partner with who they want. They can do what they want. They have private property rights like anybody else would have on those stations. The difference with UTA is that they've had a traditional willingness to work with us and with cities on doing these developments. So, yeah, we hope to have that influence, and we've got a good relationship.
So there is some optimism.
Oh, yeah, I do. I have 75% optimism.
However, something like this is quite a ways down the road.
It is, and especially because that's a great point. They're doing some of these right now. All of the ones that they're currently doing involve multifamily housing. Because their station itself doesn't include land that could contain multifamily housing. It's in their next set of things that they would do. They're not uninterested in developing an office building or some sort of retail component on their land at the station itself, but they're less interested than that kind of, I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, but multifamily is really needed in the valley right now, really hot in the valley right now, and all of their projects involve that right now.
Well, anything right around that station right there that would take parking away would be catastrophic.
Yeah, and and they have a rule about that. They replace parking one-to-one. Any parking they lose and do new development on, they will replace in a structure which is expensive. And the best payoffs are in multifamily right now. They can't do that this side, so it's going to wait a little while. So it's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Anything else?
Questions? No. All right, we'll open this up for public comment. Feel free to come up. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Rosalba Dominguez. I live at 4866 South Center Street. I have a quick question about employment. How many are living in Murray that are employed by IHC?
IHC employs roughly 5,000 people at the IHC
that live
campus.
in Murray?
Not that live in Murray.
We don't know.
Okay, because I know that's a big part of the development and wanting to have mixed house units, right? Okay, so that was one of my questions that was factored in, maybe kind of looking at that data a little bit more, because it's important. I know what's important for us personally, to have that housing for residents, and creating communities around that and having that verbiage. The other question I have is, how far out are we looking at multi-unit housing in this zone? Like, in terms of the smelter environmental, do we know how long that has to be in place for?
Yeah, if you go back to the map, this specific area wouldn't have it, but right around, they already are building multifamily. It's currently going in.
Okay, so if, let's say down the road, UTA and Murray partner up together, how many years does the environment have to be clear of smelter? No? Okay. That was just my next question, because I know Draper had similar things with chemical.
Yeah, we couldn't develop on it. I don't.
Okay. Those are my questions.
I'm sorry, ma'am, would you use the
Name and address for the record.
You could use Mr. Woodbury's microphone if you'd like.
Chad, your stuff will be cleared out tonight.
The decision the EPA made is perpetual. However, there's a possibility that the record of decision could be amended. That's a very lengthy process. It would involve a lot of public outreach. I don't know if anyone would ever attempt to do it. I don't think it's something the city would initiate. But it's basically without end with that smelter site, that it would be restricted to not have residential.
And money solves everything. You have enough money, you can do anything. But that's a private property, and they get this right. That's not us.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not something I don't think the city would ever initiate that, and may not even support that if someone did initiate it. There's a lot of unknowns, but I hope that answers your question.
My name's Mary West. I live at 91 West Washington Avenue, the neighborhood right behind the high school. And I tried taking tracks to work. I work at the VA. And trying to cross 5300 South and Woodrow right there, those people, I think they're on a death ray. They want to run you over. If you increase the living over there and you increase the tracks, you're going to have more people trying to cross that street, kids, teenagers. I see them all the time running across there. These people turning, they don't care if you're in the crosswalk or not. Heaven forbid you're a little old lady and you can't walk real fast, you know. I mean, I'm not got a backpack on. I'm a lot younger, a lot faster, but that just scares me, that right in there with all the increased, you know, the traffic and stuff. And I don't know who would be responsible for building an crossover for a pedestrian, if that's UDOT or UTA or us, but it would be nice to have some other alternate way to get across that street, other than trying to play dodgems. You know. Oh, and by the way, your link don't work, because I tried to get on. Okay? Thank you.
Just real quick, I'll address the link issue. Murray City implemented a new website on July 11th, and it broke everything that was put on between June 18th to until that point. So I had put it up on the old website, and I have just not gotten to put that back on. So it will be back on to the website probably either tomorrow or early next week. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that it should be on there. So I'll make sure and get it on there.
Yes, please.
I'm Shauna Burnett, and I'm at 46 West Woodrow Street. And I just have just a couple of quick. So, is the area in question that they're just looking at just mostly right around the, as far as the amendments that they're wanting to do, right around the city center, or are they going to cross over into encroaching to our area, which is Woodrow Street, crosses over 53rd. We already get the buildings of the medical tower or medical buildings that we've got an empty one that they built last year that they still haven't been able to fill. So, you know, that's what we're dealing with now. But, you know, so we're just worried that, you know, now, so that's encroaching down into our area. So I'm just curious, and yes, the traffic is crazy. Yeah, that just doesn't work. But so is that...
The area is limited to what you see outlined in the orange that this plan is specific to.
Okay. Well...
And there are other areas, there's different zoning areas throughout this,
right.
but...
Okay. And as far as the contaminated area, because they did come and clean up our area several years ago, but so there's different levels of where they can clean up.
Yes.
So, okay, I just was wondering if it went all the way.
Mr. Barney?
Yes, thank you. I guess I think you're too many times. As you all know, my name is Delenn Barney. I live at 4902 South Box Elder Street. And as I go to work, I park in a UTA, I rent a UTA van, and I park in the parking lot in this particular area of consideration. I notice a number of people that are from the hospital that go over to the UTA parking lot. I wonder how much of the employees that work there go over to, park in that area and go to the hospital. And if this development was to go in or something like this, how much that would impact the parking in the area and the neighborhoods. But, and then I have a little bit more general concern is the traffic that would be increased by a project like this, both the traffic and the parking by the developments and by IHC. But of a more specific concern, on Box Elder Street, where I live, north of 48th, which is, Box Elder Street is classified as a bicycle corridor, there is no sidewalks, and there are cars parked on both sides of the street, and as people drive up and down, or vehicles go up and down that street, they have to zigzag back and forth, so having bicycles thrown into that mix could provide could become hazardous to the cars and to the bicyclists. I've noticed that when the the auto repair shop on the corner of Box Elder and 48 has work going on, and the hospital, not the hospital, but the people working on the fire station are parked there. It creates a bottleneck at the same time, and so I'm concerned about considering that street as a bicycle corridor or connection for people to move on when it's already crowded and to pedestrian traffic. And then as far as where I live on Box Elder Street, my house, the map shows there's some trees in front of my house, and there is not room on the median between the sidewalk and the street to put trees. And as was discussed in some of the earlier discussions as far as parks and green spaces, that green space is mine. I own it. I don't want anybody else's trees there. As far as on the map, if he was to bring it up and show where the trees are that are across from where I live, keep going back a couple of them. One right there, right in the top of the screen in the middle. That big white square building, that's the Salt Lake Indoor Soccer. I live north of that, and if you notice, there's some trees shown there. And that street is just barely wide enough to have cars parked on either side, let alone having a bicycle lane and being some more trees put in, unless the sidewalk was to be moved further outward, which would take up my front yard or my neighbors across the yard. And I've lived there for a very long time, and I figured that would be encroaching upon my property and my space. Another concern I have is with the development that's going in there and in general in the downtown area. There's some property boundaries from my house and the property next to me that's between, theoretically on paper, between the Salt Lake Indoor Soccer and my house that somebody at one time thought was a driveway, well, not a driveway, but a access road. It's my driveway, and if someone was to, in reality, take possession of that property, I would have to force my neighbor off of his property, and he would have to challenge UTA into what property would be technically on paper as being his property. So there's some property boundary concerns in that area that needs to be addressed as development goes further forward in that center, in that Murray City Center district But my big concern is the traffic, the trees on the road, the bicycle going back and forth in front of my house as I try to pull out, or as other traffic is going back and forth. It creates a health hazard.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one else, we'll close public comment. Mr. Hall, would you mind just, first off, these are all concepts, right? There's no formal plan for any of this to move forward, so this is just ideas that were brought forward.
That's exactly right. So nothing in this is a development plan. So when the plan shows trees in front, for example, in front of Mr. Barney's home, it's not a plan to put trees in front of Mr. Barney's home. It's just an illustrative plan. So if it were to develop, et cetera, and not even really to that scale. So I don't worry about that. This is not a plan that we have proposed to UTA to do. These are concepts contained in some sort of an illustration so that UTA can consider those if they look at redevelopment of that station. To that same point, talking about 53rd South, for example, as we said, this study area and this plan, it is not a development plan, and the reach of it is only that study area. And then the things that we've looked at, the data that's contained in that plan, I would encourage all of you to go to that link on the city website and look at the actual draft plan.
Not till next week, though.
Not till next week when Zach's fixed it, but yes. But then definitely look at it. It's not supposed to say we are building this 30,000 square foot building and planting these trees and planning for this bike lane, for example. What it's supposed to do is inform our decisions as a commission and as staff about development as it comes in. So when someone comes in on the north end of IHC's property and says we're going to build an office building here, that gives us an opportunity to say, well, let's look at not just the general plan, but now at an amended general plan that includes this Murray Central Station area plan. And what does it say about crossings? How dangerous is that? Do we look at resignalizing? How do we relook at all of this mess? Is there a pedestrian crossing that needs to be done? Do we restripe things? It lets us look at all of that. And when you look at that plan, when the link is fixed, there are pages of data about. We had one other aspect of this was called an accessibility study. We hired a consultant as a part of that team who his whole function was to look at how people can right now or could in the future get in and out of this area on bikes and on foot and in cars, and how that all worked together and how it could work better. So it'll have suggestions for that kind of thing when those developments come on their own. So it's not a development plan in and of itself. It's just supposed to inform new things as they come in, if that makes sense. And I think that probably covers and the contamination we already talked about and everything. So, any other questions for staff at this point?
Boundaries. Should we address that? Boundary concerns.
Oh, the boundary concerns, Mr. Barney's, they're well documented in staff. We have the other issues in the MCCD zone that they've come up several times. We're aware of those. Thank you.
All right. Well, there's no additional questions.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the adoption of the Murray Central Station Small Area Plan as an amendment to the Murray City General Plan.
I have a motion by Mr. Woodbury to forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the adoption of the Murray Central Station Small Area Plan as an amendment to the Murray City General Plan. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Markham. Call for a vote, please.
Mr. Woodbury.
Yep.
Mr. Markham.
Yes.
Ms. Patterson.
Yes.
Ms. Volkevich.
Yes.
Mr. Day.
Yes. All right. Item number 11 is the discussion of short-term rentals within Murray City. Mr. Hall.
We have an item number
Emphasis on discussion.
It's the important salient point here. There is an item number 11 at the end of all of this. So I just have a few slides prepared. What we wanted to do for the Planning Commission was just have an open discussion about short-term rentals. We are not proposing a text amendment, although we have had requests for that. We've asked them to wait to continue their request until we can get an idea as a city of what we think should happen. So we want to have a discussion with the Planning Commission so that discussion can be sort of the jumping off point to talk to the Mayor's Office, City Council about what might be appropriate as a course of action for staff to take. To start that discussion, let me just make sure everyone is clear about how it works currently and what a short-term rental is. So a short-term rental, we're talking about things like Airbnb, Airbnb and Breakfast, and VRBO, HomeAway. The internet has kind of created an ability for people to make available parts of their home or their whole home for people to rent when they're on vacation. And it's sort of exploded in recent years. There are millions of these facilities in the United States, currently millions of dollars at stake as they get used. And that's the kind of discussion we need to have. We call them, for shorthand, short-term rentals, anything less than 30 days. Right now in Murray, anything that gets rented, any dwelling that gets rented for less than 30 days is considered short-term, and it's not allowed anywhere but in our commercial zone. So the difference here is, with Airbnb, you're a short-term rental, but you're in a residential zone. You're in an RM10 or you're in an R1A or in a neighborhood. And they're just not allowed. The use exists, 30 days or less, but it's not allowed in those zones. What Airbnb would like to do is have an allowance for, or those short-term rental companies would like an allowance in residential zoning for those kinds of things. There are cities that are doing it. There are cities that are prohibiting it. In effect, we kind of prohibit Airbnbs. There aren't a lot of people that want to rent somebody's house for 30 days in a residential zone. So that's not happening a lot. So right now, we don't allow Airbnbs. That is not to say that we don't have them. So the first slide to talk about is reasons to regulate short-term rentals. What reasons might we have to do that? And the first item is it's already happening, as many of you are probably aware. Anybody not aware of Airbnbs somewhere? We've had several cases. Jim could tell you we've had lots of, not lots of, but several complaints about, well, maybe lots of is fair.
We talked about a few in the pre-meeting.
Yeah. There are cases where Airbnbs or short-term rentals in neighborhoods cause issues, and we get complaints about them, and we have to enforce, do co-enforcement action on them. We have several currently going on. So that does happen. They are out there. Under state code, a lot of people would say, why don't we just find out where they all are and go and prosecute them? We're not allowed to do that under state code. The Utah State does not allow us to prosecute people for operating an otherwise unpermitted short-term rental if the only way we know about it is because of the listing. We have to have a complaint if we're going to prosecute, if we're going to enforce. That's a relatively new law, a couple years, but the state has sort of embraced them, but not all the way fully yet. It can potentially have negative impacts. We talked about that. Parking, sometimes noise late at night, trash. We've had a couple of particularly bad examples. There are others. There are probably multiple examples of perfectly well-run Airbnbs that don't cause problems in neighborhoods for all of those that do, but they do have potential negative impacts. It can also negatively impact service jobs in the area. There are people that work at the hotels and in service industry that depend on those jobs, and if those are impacted by Airbnbs, although the statistics do kind of trend toward saying that they don't really impact those hotel rates. The vacancy rates don't seem to be impacted by Airbnbs. However, that's all pretty new data still too, so take that as it is. Without regulation, there's a potential loss of tax or licensing revenues. We don't collect licensing fees on those rentals because we don't deal with them. We don't license any of them. So that's another reason that we might want to consider short-term rentals. Any others that you can think of that I've not listed here? Things that come to mind?
Well, you know, as I've looked at different things and tried to study this a little bit in the short time that we've been noticed of this discussion, I can't see a lot of positive things that they do for the neighborhood and for the neighborhood environment. Now, they may have a positive effect on people that, you know, are in this market that want to do this, but I would challenge anyone to tell me what benefit a residential neighborhood would have with this type of activity. And once again, you're going to hear my favorite refrain. If we regulate these, that means we have to enforce our regulations.
That's a great point.
We do not enforce regulations to the degree that they need to be done.
And this would be adding to that. So what?
Absolutely.
That's perfect. If you don't mind, I'm going to go to the next stage.
I don't want to add more regulations that we can't take care of. Already enforce the current regulations on the books.
What I think, and based on that, and I'm going to move forward one slide just to show you that we have some options and concerns. Challenges are how do we regulate them? If we make a bunch of regulations to feel good about allowing them, can we back that up with staff and time and things to do that? And maybe we can, maybe we can't, I don't know. But I tend to agree with Commissioner Markham. It would be difficult with current staff. I don't know how we would do that. Correct. But let me go back to objectives for Murray. I think the most important thing we can do as just a simple discussion is identify what the objectives would be for Murray. Like Phil said, what are the reasons that we would want to do it? So there are a short list of reasons that we might want to regulate them. They don't include it's great for your community because it brings people together. That's not going to be on there. What would be the objectives for Murray? If you have a town like Park City, for example, and we are not Park City, we're not San Diego. I stay in a month and a half, I'll be in San Diego in an Airbnb, in a VRBO, in a condo. if Melinda isn't firing me tomorrow morning for making her come over using my
You can still go to the VRBO.
You can still go.
You just may need to live there.
Stay longer.
Yeah, you just may stay longer.
And that
It's not
unit that I
paid
stay in,
for.
that building that I stay in, the lady that rents them out to us, she has these rules that her condo set up. There are a lot of VRBO units in this condo, and she owns like 3 or 4 of them. Her family, they inherited them, and that's the only way you can get property in California anymore is to inherit it from somebody and keep it that way. She rents them out, and they have to rent them out by the week. If I'm going to stay 2 days, I pay for the week, and the condo sits empty for the rest of the week that I'm not there. That's their rules in their condo. San Diego has rules that they've just enacted on Airbnbs and how to deal with them, and we'll see how they work out. Sandy has adopted an ordinance. It contains a lot of enforcement.
Sandy's a destination city, obviously.
They're hoping for that destination. They're hoping for the canyons. They're hoping for access up the canyons for cheaper options to stay out of Park City, stay in Sandy, and run up the mountain. Right. So in keeping with that, they've adopted these regulations. I look at Sandy's regulations, and I don't know how in the world. I'm not sure how we would do that. They've divided the city up into these communities.
Correct.
And so they have these kind of neighborhood council areas, and in each one you get a certain number, and then per every 100 housing units you get another one. So I don't know how they're going to count that. I don't know how they're going to regulate it. It's tough.
The other big thing is, and we talked about this earlier, and we're starting to see this in a lot of these regulations, is they have to be owner occupied.
Right.
And that's the key. And that steers a lot of people away because they want the whole unit for rental.
Yes,
short-term rentals. So the owner occupied, the ordinances we have seen are requiring owner occupied. Just like an accessory dwelling unit does.
Yeah, I'm really curious how this would play with the current accessory dwelling units. So we've already forbidden by condition to do this. How would that work?
I would kind of assume that we would, and I don't know. That's part of the discussion we need to have. I would tend to say I would suggest that we would keep accessory dwelling units. The purpose of accessory dwelling units was to create additional opportunities for housing, not for increasing the income of a person who stays in a house. However, it's really not even that simple because an aging population in those houses needs a way to stay in that house. We want people to age in place. If their opportunity to do that is greater by allowing them short-term rentals in their basement instead of the ADU, my biggest concern with it as a staff person is affordable housing. It does seem to undercut, it does seem to have an effect on affordable housing. In New Orleans, it's having an effect. New York State is still prohibiting them outright. They're in a giant battle with Airbnb, not allowing short-term rentals. And the industry seems to tend to say that it's because the hotel and service industry lobby has bought them and said they don't want to do it. The planning side says it's undercutting affordability of housing. And in a city like New York or in Los Angeles or San Francisco and now Salt Lake, that's a problem. In the Salt Lake Valley, affordability of housing is a huge issue. So it's good for people to be able to make some income, but it also does impact affordability of housing. As I looked at objectives for Murray, and these are just kind of my suggestions, and I want you guys to take them and think about them and tell me what else you think. We would want to maximize the availability of affordable housing options. That would mean that if we did allow, this is assuming we would allow something, we would want to assure that they were owner-occupied in some way. That would mean they were at least being occupied by long-term residents, and then those residents were using them. I would say if accessory dwelling units are a better option, maybe we limit the number of, to keep accessory dwelling units a better option than a better lucrative option than short-term rentals, so that we would keep incentivizing people to do that and not lose out on that, because I would hate to see that trend reverse. We'd want to try to limit the number of days that you could do it. We already have the residency occupancy. I think that's a great idea too. Limiting the number of days is tricky because
How do you enforce it?
It's hard to enforce, and it's even harder to enforce because you can't get the data from the companies. They will not.
They're not going to give it to you. Yeah.
They won't release it. People have tried, and all the cities that have ordinances that do that can't get the data.
And if you can't enforce it, defeats the purpose of putting it in place.
Right. Then it's not worth having, right? So that's the other main issue. We need to be able to do it. We need to ensure that they're regulated, that it's a level playing field. We would want to minimize the erosion of community, because if there's whole segments of New Orleans, for example, in these articles that I'll link for you that Bryant had linked for us, whole segments of the French, just outside the French Quarter, row upon row upon row of homes have gone to short-term rentals. They're very lucrative, but all of the interests that own those homes all the entities that own those homes are from out of state. They're from other places.
Have you been to New Orleans, Jared?
Never.
Yeah, make a visit, then you'll know why.
I'll understand.
It's a hole.
That happens here too.
Food's good, but the place
couple of articles that we read also talk about how people, and I've seen this happen just watching property records too. People will buy homes sight unseen. Investors from other places will buy homes without ever seeing them and never set foot in that house. They'll turn it over to a property management company and start renting it out. Right. And if they can rent it out short-term rental, they will. That happens a lot. So it's not that it's not a viable land use for a property owner. That's not really the issue for us. It can happen, it is happening, and it makes people money. The question we have to ask is, in what way does it relate to Murray? Are we the kind of city that needs those, that should depend on them? Or are we okay not doing something for short-term rentals? There is a demand for it. People want it. We're going to process an application for a text amendment to allow it, whether this group wants to see it or not. Sure. So we just are trying to kind of put it in front of you.
That's a good idea. Yeah, have it for discussion. Yeah, absolutely.
Is there a particular zone that you see this, or do you see it as all general residential zones?
That's a great question. So that's all on the table. What we've thought about areas.
Only professional office. That's it.
Professional office.
Yeah, that's it.
You're a bad man, Mr. Mayor, as I told you before. Somewhere around the hospital might make sense. If we were going to limit it to geographic areas, the areas that would make sense would seem to be as you get closer to the interchange of 215, as you get toward that sandy corridor that takes you up to the canyons. Maybe that makes sense if people wanted to use them in that area. If we wanted to benefit Murray from people using them, if we were going to use that angle, we would probably say around the hospital, where people have a need for longer term stays that are more comfortable, where you can have more people with you, and so those limitations that hotels have aren't on you if you have to be 30 days at the hospital for some reason. Or in our downtown area where maybe it brings people to the downtown because they're staying in these Airbnbs and maybe they're here for
the Desert Star Theater.
Well, I don't think they're coming out of town for the Desert Star, but still, it could be that if there's a
Wild Night of Root Beer,
it's that.
A place to crash.
Maybe it's that. We don't really know.
Yeah, right. They're getting dirty soda now. They're gonna need a place to crash.
We could see something in the future. Maybe right now that doesn't exist as much. But if there's an area where maybe it makes sense, is in the downtown. Yeah. But again, we need those affordable housing units in the downtown area too. So I'm not sure how that works.
What kind of standards would you see in this? So, because there's websites that are popping up now where I can crash on your couch.
Right.
How do we deal with that? A tent in someone's sure. That's great. Like, does it have to be inside of an actual structure? A certain.
We would probably want to regulate
amenities
that. Things keep going
of
the way they're going currently in the Salt Lake Valley. People will be paying to sleep in people's cars.
I could see I agree with all the negative potential it has. Well, but I keep thinking about like the Olympics. I think during the Olympics, 6% of the community rented their houses out.
They probably did.
So around special events, maybe.
Yeah, special events. What is a special event?
Yeah, how do you define that? Yeah.
Who says what a special event is? I know Salt Lake City back during the was doing some stuff with them. I had to go review all their policies after the fact. And at one point in time, I think the mayor actually had to approve for you to be able to do it. It was some crazy rule about it. So.
Yeah, I wish I had better answers for you. Again, it's just a thing that we felt like we needed to bring up to you and get a kind of an idea of where you are on that map of the possibilities of short-term rentals. These are kind of the options that we identified. There could be specific city areas that we said short-term rentals may make sense here. We could have a requirement for residency to try to ameliorate some of those effects. We could have an allowance for, are there areas where a whole home short-term rental is appropriate? I kind of tend to think there aren't as I look at the map of Murray, where it wouldn't be anything but detrimental to anybody but the person that owns the property. And not that people shouldn't be able to make money off their properties, but there are other ways to make money off your property, so I don't feel like you're taking everything from them. We could limit them by number. Again, that's tricky. How you control those numbers, how you track those numbers. Or we could just continue to prohibit rentals that are happening less than 30 days.
But Jared, you said that we're going to have a text amendment to allow them.
You're going to get a request. We've already had one person ask to amend the code. We asked them to wait until we could have a conversation about it, and they agreed. Yeah. So,
I mean, the hard thing for me on this whole issue is people are doing it anyway. We don't have the staff to enforce any sort of regulation that we make, whether it's, option one, specific areas. Okay, do we have the staff to enforce it?
Yeah.
Not really. Requirement for residency. Can we enforce that?
We could enforce that. We do it with ADUs.
Okay, so it'd be like ADUs.
But only if they get reported.
But again, only if they get reported. Allow for some whole home. okay, which areas do you say whole home and which areas do you say not? Limit, the number. Okay, well, we say, okay, it's 100 per, whatever.
Vape shop.
What?
Based on vape shops.
Yeah, and you can do vape shops, so you have 4. But then what happens is someone's like, okay, well, I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah. And so, I mean, I guess I kind of look at this as, I would like to see more data from what other cities have adopted ordinances and see how they're how they're doing.
And maybe cities more similar to us.
Well, I mean, whether it's more similar or just any of them, I think it's a new area, and there's so many things we just can't enforce.
Yeah, it really does kind of come down to that. We've looked at a few cities, and I didn't want to give you a bunch of city ordinances to look at until we've had kind of the basic conversation. I thought the most important thing would probably be to establish an idea of what our objectives would be. Yeah. It's almost an either or kind of situation. Do we keep our status quo and say we just don't allow them, and that's where we're still going to be? We're going to enforce the ones that we hear about, or do we want to open it up for licensing? And then, if so, how far can we go with licensing before that the revenue from licensing them will pay? Will it pay for a new person to review those codes or enforce those codes? Or
is that what other cities are doing, requiring a license and enforcing
license fees?
See, so that's what I'd love to see, some data to say, is Sandy or other places, are they?
They're all based on the enforcement, so it's kind of a self-eating animal.
Exactly. So I'd love to see another city actually say, yes, we instituted the licensing. It generated X amount of revenue. We're then able to hire someone who was just designated at enforcing this. Yeah. Yes, it's been a good thing. I'm just, I'm so much like Phil, why do we keep passing things that we just can't enforce? I mean, yeah, there are a lot of people like chickens and bees that, they will follow, bees, because chickens are, still prohibited. They'll follow them if they know, but again, we don't enforce it, right? I mean, I could point out 15 neighbors that have chickens, and what do we do about it?
On record.
So
that's fine. I'm not going to tell their address on the record, but
so the consensus is, if I'm hearing right, then it's not it's not an off the table kind of a thing.
Oh, no. It could be anything can be brought to us. Yeah. We should be open and be willing to consider anything. Yeah. And
But we want to see, are there certain limitations that you'd like to see more than others, and we'll look for cities that do that, see if the monetizing works.
Owner occupied.
If I trash your recommendation that you present to us, don't be offended.
Yeah, me too. I'm just telling Marin, I actually have a coworker. We have a bunch of our sales reps in town for the sales, and he didn't want to stay in a hotel, so our sales conferences in West Valley, he's staying in an Airbnb in Midvale, just because it was less than a hotel.
Right. Midvale doesn't let him happen either.
Mm-hmm. Well, but that's where he's staying, and it's a whole home. I asked him, I said, how many rooms you got? He's like, it's 4. It's great. I walk around, sleep in a different bed each night. I'm like, awesome. And he's like, and it's half the price of a hotel. So the point is that it's happening. I don't feel like we have enough data. I'm totally open to look at any text amendment and any ordinance, but I just don't feel like that we can really do much about it.
Commissioner Woodbury, I think those are all very valid comments, because what we have seen in a few of the ordinances we've been able to obtain, so we can do some benchmarking. But it's the things you say. There is a yearly fee to register, your short-term rental. There are provisions for fines. And I indicated in the pre-meeting that we had an occurrence recently with an Airbnb in Murray City, where our police department was called 6 times in one evening. So that is, a real wear and tear on our resources as a city. So violations, for a first violation, you get a fine this amount, for a second this amount, for a third this amount, and a revocation. The other thing is that we want to take a look at, and this would be a serious consideration, I think it would be a special use permit done at an administrative level, because, I don't think we can handle every single one of these as a conditional use like an ADU.
Unless
we're going to get quite a few.
Or licensing.
So there's a lot of things out there. We can do some benchmarking and come back. Those are all good, valid points.
I'm also a little worried that we're not being honest with ourselves. All the data that we can accumulate will tell us one thing, but internal data, we don't enforced well now. We don't have the funding to enforce everything that we have on the books now.
Correct.
That needs to be corrected.
And here's the other thing: every one of us in here like VRBO.
I was gonna
and
say,
Airbnb.
I think-
I stayed in a beautiful one in Rome because the hotels around it were all junky, and it was half the price.
I'm going to one tomorrow.
And Chad will be
Right.
there tomorrow, probably for about a month.
One other key thing I've seen is the contact information of the owner has to be readily available in the event of an emergency or a situation like we had occur. And the response we got was, that's Airbnb's fault. They didn't screen the applicant appropriately.
The whole
That's
point of
not a
keeping them
valid
on the
answer.
property, making them live in the house.
That's not the correct answer, so that's a problem.
The owner
And
has
if you
to
don't
be
have
on
them, if you don't have them owner occupied, like Jim was just saying, we need that contact. So that seems like a kind of a clear, a bright line to me is owner occupation, because Airbnb, for example, won't allow that. In their most recent cases, they've removed any software that would put the owner's information up on the websites for the cities to see. That's been removed from any cities that were doing that. That was recently removed a couple of months ago. So they're not sharing that kind of data because they don't want to deal with it. So our only way to contact people for sure would be to make sure that they were all owner occupied, so we have a record and a license of that owner. It's a tough thing. So that's kind of a bright line. The other, we'll lean heavy into how much the monetary, the fines and things for different cities have been able to pay for additional enforcement, because that's the other biggest concern is if we adopt something and we're trying to create an ordinance that won't do the bad things like erode community and erode affordability of housing. We can't do that without lots of restrictions, and if we can't enforce those restrictions, then we aren't doing what we're trying to do. So when we benchmark, we'll benchmark probably more for the monetizing than for the actual codes. Those codes are pretty, we've read most of them right now. Like Jim said, we've looked at some codes. We'll look at those things, but we'll look heavily at the financial aspects of it as well. And we can bring more information back to you. We did want to just have a good discussion so we can inform the other groups. City Council, Mayor,
let's schedule another discussion. Later in the year.
We'll do that.
Yeah,
we'll do that. Thank you. Anything else that you want to talk about tonight?
Just that I turn 62 next week, and I've been here a long time tonight, and I'm starting to fade. All right. Motion to adjourn.
And Jared, enjoy your Airbnb.
I will. I got 6 kids. I can't afford to go to San Diego without her.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I guess it's done.